The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome once again. My name is Michael Kane. I am the Director of Advocacy at Children's Health Defense. Today, we are going to be discussing your employer can mandate killing you with constitutional civil rights attorney Sujata Gibson. And then after we talk to Sujata about 3 lawsuits that are very important, Dr. Meryl Nass is on with Crisis, Save Our Food and Farms. I'm actually really excited about that. Dr. Nass will be here every Tuesday after my segment. She will be coming on to discuss the ongoing food and farming crisis in this nation. What a great addition to CHD TV. And after that, there is going to be another story from a medical professional. All week in August, we are highlighting medical professionals. And before we bring on Sujata Gibson, as always, we have some news. So in terms of your employer can mandate killing you, the lawsuit that we're going to be discussing involves firefighter O'Brien Pastrana. This was covered in Defender years ago when this firefighter was injured by the COVID vaccine and forced to retire. He sued New York City over this. Well, he has now lost. And they basically have said, well, it was your choice to take this shot. So you lose on this. But he got injured by the first shot and was forced to take the second one as well, too. We're going to get all into that with Sujata Gibson. We're also going to talk with Sujata Gibson about New York City unvaccinated teachers going to SCOTUS. We have applied for a cert petition at the Supreme Court. This is in the case Kane versus de Blasio, also referred to as Kane versus City of New York. Now, what is happening now? What happens next? Is this guaranteed to go to the Supreme Court? Is this guaranteed to get rejected? We're going to have updates on exactly what will be happening. Sujata will talk through that one. And one more court case. Next Tuesday, if you're in New York, you need to come to the courthouse in Long Island. This is a major case over a girl, Sarah Doe, who lost her religious exemption in 2019 when it was made illegal to have religious exemptions in New York. And after being injured through a slew of vaccinations, she had 7 medical exemptions provided to her, and all of them have been denied by her school, and she's being denied an education. So next Tuesday, everybody, if you can get there in Long Island, we need you to come out to the court. No signs. This is not a rally. Dress respectfully for the court. We're going to be kind and quiet. We can't make noise in the courtroom. All of that good stuff. The link is in the show notes here to make sure you can come out to support. That's going to be a critical case. Now, also another case, we're not going to talk about this one so much today, but the federal court, the Ninth Circuit Court, has ruled against Los Angeles teachers over the COVID vaccine mandate for the employees in Los Angeles Unified School District. This case was brought by Leslie Manukian and Health Freedom Defense Fund. You might remember they had a huge victory in the Ninth Circuit where it was ruled that the COVID shot does not prevent transmission. Wasn't ruled. It was the facts were taken as true, which is what the CDC says, what everybody says, that the COVID shot does not stop transmission of the virus. Therefore, the Jacobson case doesn't apply because Jacobson was based on the smallpox vaccine a century ago, which was able to and assumed to prevent transmission. The new ruling by the Ninth Circuit, they did an en banc hearing, which is where every judge in the court comes together to make a decision. The new ruling says, no, the officials only had to believe that it prevented transmission. And if they believed it prevented transmission, the mandate was legal and justified. There is a dissent in this. So not every judge agreed, and that is very important. We're going to have to look at that dissent. I hope to have Leslie Manukian on the show sometime soon to discuss through this. She did just publish an article on her Substack about it. Very important case. We're going to follow that closely. Children's Health Defense has just asked for Senator Bernie Moreno to consider convening Senate hearings on fired unvaccinated workers. And Mary Holland, the CEO of CHD, and myself wrote to Senator Moreno. I can tell you the letter was very, very well received. We then, over at Teachers for Choice, an action was put out for people to call Senator Moreno, to email him. And I know hundreds of you did. God bless you, everybody that did. And I can tell you, your emails and your calls are being well received. God bless you, Senator Bernie Moreno. Thank you for caring about this. And thank you to your staff and to your office, who has been great to everyone that's reaching out to you. We look forward to upcoming dialogue and action and next steps. Very, very, very happy about that. You might not remember, that Senator Moreno made some amazing comments about COVID during Voices of the Vaccine Injured, where Polly Tommy and Brian Hooker gave testimony in front of Ron Johnson's Senate subcommittee. Moreno made it all about COVID and said, we will never know where we're going if we don't look back at where we've been and have a reckoning and settle what really happened during COVID. God bless you, Senator Moreno. We so greatly appreciate it. Secretary Kennedy, this is awesome. Let's put up this tweet. I want to read through this. Thanks to the leadership of Dr. Oz, we've just repealed a dangerous Biden-era provision in the CMS inpatient payment rule that pressured hospitals to mandate the COVID-19 shots for doctors and nurses. This rule tied public reporting of staff vaccination rates to federal incentives, turning hospitals into enforcers instead of caregivers. It was a backdoor mandate, pure and simple, and it had no place in a system that should protect informed consent. I agree completely, Secretary Kennedy. Shout out to you, to HHS, to CMS for doing the right thing on this. Remember, there was a real full-blown mandate that came for all federal workers through OSHA, and then as well for medical workers. That went to the Supreme Court. The OSHA one was thrown out as unconstitutional, but doing it for anyone accepting Medicaid or Medicare funds was upheld. The woman who led the charge against both of those mandates, Harmeet Dillon, who's currently heading up the Civil Rights Division of Department of Justice. Shout out Harmeet Dillon. I can never say enough good stuff about Harmeet. She's doing amazing work fighting for all Americans, vaccinated or not. Thank you for that very important work. Vinay Prasad has been pressured out of the FDA. Our pharma lobbyist behind Vinay Prasad's ouster from FDA. Spoiler alert. Yes. It is. That is what happened, and it's really a shame. Vinay Prasad did some great things. He had some very good views on a lot of stuff. He also disagreed with a lot of medical freedom folks on a lot of stuff. And earlier on in the pandemic, there was definitely tensions between Vinay and medical freedom leaders. And I think maybe right when he needed a base of people to support him, it was just something he didn't have cultivated. Some people were even wondering if it was good that Vinay Prasad got ousted and, oh, good, he's not really on board with Bobby's agenda. All types of chatter happening throughout the community. It looks like, no, it was a bad thing. He was willing to pull dangerous drugs. He was willing to say, no, the data says this drug is dangerous. We might not agree with him on everything with vaccines, but I do think it was ultimately a loss, unfortunately. Health Action Massachusetts had a huge victory. They said it was impossible. But when our children's future is under threat, parents rise and the impossible becomes possible. That's Candace Edwards, Executive Director of Health Action Massachusetts. She's been on this show a number of times. They had the bill to repeal the religious exemption in a committee guaranteed to get to the House floor in Boston. And after actions, which CHD put out an action and supported that, we got it removed from that committee. And Candace and others were told that has not happened in over 20 years. She was told, don't even try. It's a guarantee. It's passing the House. And it did not. Shout out Massachusetts, making it happen. And thank you to the advocacy team at CHD who got an action alert out, who alerted thousands of people in Massachusetts. Here we go. Defender covered it. Advocates for religious exemptions notch victories in West Virginia and Massachusetts. In West Virginia, some court cases are winning where the executive order to allow religious exemptions to let kids back into school, there are more than one victory happening in the court to allow kids to return to school, which is fantastic. Facial recognition at the airports, creeping up and worse. There is a right to refuse the photo, yes. The problem is that almost no one knows about it. And many who try to exercise that right end up having a pretty unpleasant experience. Goodbye to privacy. In the US, TSA imposes facial scanners at more airports, and complaints about mass surveillance grows. This is going to be the issue 2025, 2026, 2027. That's not going to go well. Unfortunately, there's bipartisan support for this when it comes to mass surveillance, facial recognition, increased data banking of our data banking of our health data. We've even seen Secretary Kennedy and Trump and others promoting the health data ecosystem, which there are some benefits from, but the civil liberties implications are stark, and we need to organize around that. And with that, I am going to bring on constitutional and civil rights attorney, my attorney, the amazing Sujata Gibson. Sujata, welcome to Good Morning CHD. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
So the first case I want to talk, that's the one we talked about on Tuesday that I was calling for people to show up to that case. This is Sarah Doe versus Oceanside School District, I believe. And why don't you tell people about this case, what's the background of it, and why it's so important?
Yes, this is against the Oceanside Union Free School District on Long Island. And Sarah Doe is 16 years old. She had a religious exemption until she was 11 in 2019. And at that point, New York repealed the religious exemption, and she was forced to get 18 different vaccines within a matter of weeks.
Wow.
So her health collapsed. She went from being a kid that was so healthy she had never been to the doctor other than for well visits. Any cold, flu, whatever that went through, she cleared it in like 24 hours. To being in and out of the hospital. Her mother's a nurse. She's watched her flatline and almost die multiple times.
Oh my God.
She has a cascade of conditions that nobody really understands. She has, for example, she periodically gets paralyzed and no one knows why. She gets she has like a blood clotting disorder. She has a bleeding disorder and an autoimmune condition. And then she has this anaphylactic rash that won't go away. And that's kind of the scariest thing, because even though she's treating it, it's not going away, and anything can trigger it. And one of the things we know triggers it is vaccines. So she's only missing one vaccine, the third hepatitis B shot in the series for hepatitis B. And the school pulled her medical exemption this year for no reason. And she got another one and another one and another one. And ultimately, she had 7 different doctors certifying she needed a medical exemption. She even went to a walk-in clinic to try to get vaccinated against medical advice. She didn't tell them. Her and her father went, and they decided not to tell them what the conditions were that she had. And still the walk-in clinic took one look at her rash and said, "You're ineligible. You could die if you take this shot." And still the school won't accommodate her. And the Department of Health has said that they're well within their rights not to. So anyway, this is a horrific case, but the upshot of it is, we have a real chance of not only fixing this broken medical exemption problem through this case, but also getting back the religious accommodation. So it's a little complicated, but I'm happy to explain.
Well, so that's so Sujata, I'm from New York. You as well. In New York, Connecticut, Maine, California, the idea of bringing back the religious exemption for children to attend school. There are thousands, tens of millions of people that are wondering, oh my God, how can that happen? What could happen? So take a little bit of time on that. Why is this case about a medical exemption? Why is it
Right.
that this case might actually help bring back the religious exemption to New York State?
Well, two ways. The first is it's just the first case that has been brought on the religious exemption since the Supreme Court's huge decision this June, Mahmoud v. Taylor. So, um, up until June of this year, the legal landscape for the religious exemption, especially here in New York and other states in the Second Circuit, um, was that we couldn't challenge it constitutionally that New York took away the religious exemption because the state said this is a neutral and generally applicable law. So there's this kind of barrier to getting First Amendment protection. We do have this right not to have our free exercise of religion burdened, but in the 1990s, the courts set up a barrier saying you only get to look at that constitutional right if the law is, targeting religion, or if it has carve outs for other reasons, but they're not giving you a carve out for religion. And so there's been a whole battle on that, and I'll explain why this case could still maybe probably get past that battle. But in June, Mahmoud v. Taylor was issued, and the Supreme Court said, when it comes to parental religious rights, you don't need to prove that it's not neutral or generally applicable. That barrier goes away. The
Wow.
school needs to prove that there's no less restrictive way to meet a compelling state need. And so in that case, they said that laws which infringe on parents' religious rights, that it could be really any parental right. That's something we're working out in the courts right now. I read it that way, but certainly if it comes to a religious belief that parents have, if the school policy, even if it's a general policy, is burdening that, you're supposed to get strict scrutiny. So this is we luckily already had this case in the queue. We already had a First Amendment challenge, and we have a hearing on the 12th
Wow.
to bring this to the judge. So, we really have a chance um, of getting that ruling now that says, yes, there has to be a religious accommodation available in these school vaccine laws.
So, okay, I want to talk just a little bit about this before we go on to the other cases. So there has to be strict scrutiny. That means it's not a general rule that applies to everybody. We have to look at the individual. We have to look at things like what vaccines are they missing? What would the impact be on the school if this person was in? All of these different things that need to be looked at. In Sarah's case, I actually think it looks very, very good because there's one vaccine that even if she had Hep B, even if she had infectious Hep B, they have to let her in the school. So the fact that she doesn't have the vaccine for it, it would completely fall apart in strict scrutiny for her in order to come in. However, I want to put out there that I'm sure there's going to be discussion. I think you even referenced it about, well, okay, yes, there is this compelling need for religious liberty for the parent and the kids, but there is also a public health compelling need that needs to be looked at as well, too. I'm sure that argument is going to come up at some point. We don't have enough time for you to really truly argue that out. But what would you say to that when people would say, sure, that's one compelling need, but there's a public health compelling need as well,
Well,
too?
I mean, as you said, in the case of this particular case, hepatitis B, it is absolutely the state of the law that even if Sarah was actively infected with it, it would be illegal to bar her from school. Many children with hepatitis B are allowed to attend school in New York State, and the CDC has said it doesn't even spread in a school setting. And the vaccine doesn't stop transmission. It's like the COVID vaccine. So that one's very clear cut. But I would say for all of these vaccine cases, all we've ever wanted is actual analysis of safety on a case-by-case basis. If there is right now, the state of the law is the state can mandate dozens of vaccines with no compelling need and no need to prove that they need to deny reasonable accommodations. What strict scrutiny does is it says, okay, if you truly have no other way to protect from like a raging pandemic that's happening, maybe there needs to be something else that happens. Maybe that child needs to study online or whatever. I mean, my feeling is they can't prove that they need to do it though, because they have to have actual evidence and they have to really show that there's no less restrictive way to handle the situation. And when you look at the data, that's just, I mean, certainly in this case, that's an absurd, uh, an absurd endeavor. She obviously is not a danger to anyone because she's missing the third
Okay.
hepatitis B shot.
Okay, Sujata, we're going to have to bring you back for a full show on this one. I want to go through the other two cases that we have. Another case is about adults. These next two cases we're going to cover are about adults. And this one's about New York City teachers. It impacts me directly. I was one of the teachers that was fired in this case. Lou, if we could put up the NY teachers. NY teachers fired for refusing COVID vaccine take case to U.S. Supreme Court. So this was the Kane versus de Blasio case that was merged with Kyle versus NYC, Children's Health Defense, the Gibson law firm, Nelson Madden Black, and Alliance Defending Freedom. Some real heavyweights there are all attorneys on this case. For most of us, for 19 or so plaintiffs of us, we've reached kind of the end of the road. They've ruled against us. They've dismissed our cases with prejudice in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. But now, just last month, this case is applying for cert with the Supreme Court. So tell us a little bit about that and what's next, what we can expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important case to appeal. Alliance Defending Freedom and Children's Health Defense are supporting this appeal, and what New York did not only violated the constitutional rights of thousands of employees, yourself included, but it is an outlier. Every other circuit in this entire nation has ruled the other way on this. They it's very clear that religious beliefs are protected even if the Pope disagrees with you, or that you can't treat people whose guidance comes from prayer worse than people whose guidance comes from uh, a person who tells them from the church that they can't do something. And that's not what New York did. They essentially set up two tracks. So people who qualified under this very narrow written policy that said Christian Scientists can get accommodation, but not Catholics and Buddhists and Jews and most other religions. Under that policy, 165 people were accommodated. And then when the court said, yeah, I guess that is illegal, their solution was to set up a worse policy for all those religions that had been excluded and say, but you can be excluded under a worse, more difficult policy that says that we're going to assume it's an undue hardship to accommodate anyone else.
Yeah, there were, as you talk about splits, circuit court splits, that's when one federal appeals court rules one way and another rules a different way. And in fact, it appears there are multiple federal circuits ruling in favor of religious liberty, in favor of plaintiffs such as myself. And the Second Circuit seems a little isolated in this. They seem a little bit alone in having, and it also seems like they give lip service to, oh yeah, no, of course, that's what's supposed to happen. And it did happen, but clearly it didn't. It's almost like a real three-card Monte game. It's really like they really are trying to play these facts to be something they're entirely not, and thus creating a terrible precedent, I think, in New York City and possibly New York State, possibly even the country, but definitely for New York if this stands.
The most exciting circuit split that we're asking the court to look at is this question of whether, when you have a religious exemption available, does strict scrutiny apply when you're accepting some and denying others? And it really should, because nowhere do you see a clearer example than New York City's decision to discriminate between religions in the application of their religious exemption process. They had a written policy that said, we're going to do this. They've admitted in court they're doing it. So, I think this Kane v. de Blasio in November 2021 held, yes, that does trigger strict scrutiny. You do have to then look at it. But then the court overruled themselves in this case.
Oh,
And
God.
many other circuits in the meantime had already ruled based on Kane that you do get strict scrutiny anytime there's a religious accommodation and it's denied. So this is an exciting thing. It could really protect religious people from the kind of religious interrogation that we see way too often, and from governments being able to use this power to arbitrarily pick and choose between religions they like and don't like.
Yeah. So, but the Supreme Court doesn't have to take it, right? When you file cert with the Supreme Court, it is up to the court. That was filed 2 weeks ago or something like that. What's the timeline that we're looking at? When do we hear from the court? I believe New York City gets an opportunity to respond, yada, 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 all that stuff. Give us a little idea of what the timeline might look like before we know if the Supreme Court will hear this.
So the case was docketed, we filed in July. We just got notification that they've, docketed the case yesterday, and that starts a clock for other people to file what's called amicus briefs that would support this. So there are people that are and organizations that are considering filing amicus briefs, that would increase the chances of this case being taken up by the Supreme Court. And then possibly there could be a response, or the city could waive a response, and then it could take several months before the court gets together to decide whether to take the case. I will say it's extremely rare for the Supreme Court to take any case. The odds are slim. But Alliance Defending Freedom is at the helm on this one, and they have a very good track record, so that gives us a bit of an edge, and it's a very important issue, so we really hope the court does take it up. There's a lot of people affected by these very same policies nationwide.
And if your organization is concerned with medical freedom, is concerned with religious freedom, please consider writing an amicus brief for the Kane versus de Blasio case. You can reach out to us here at CHD. You can reach out to the Sujata, the Gibson law firm, because we definitely do need support, because this could definitely make a big difference, especially in regards to religious liberty. Now, I want to go towards the medical exemption again for adults in this situation, because the title of this segment that we had was that your employer could mandate killing you. And a decision just came down in New York for a firefighter, O'Brien Pastrana. Let's put up that old Defender article. 35-year-old firefighter injured by COVID vaccine, forced to retire, sues New York City for disability. So O'Brien has now gone through, I guess he's 37 now. This was 2 years ago. O'Brien's now gone through the system, and he lost in a chilling way. Sujata, why don't you set it up for us a little bit, the background of this case?
Yeah, so firefighter Pastrana was a hero, really. He was young, but he had exhibited, many times done really brave things. He'd run into buildings with burning buildings, and rescued people at great peril to himself, and he was decorated for that. And then the COVID vaccine mandate came out, and he took the first shot. He didn't want to, but he did it because they asked him to. He got very, very sick. He had a severe anaphylactic reaction. It didn't go away. So after he took it, he was hospitalized at least 3 times in the ER by his employer. They sent him in the ambulance from the firehouse because the anaphylactic reaction was not going away, and he was getting, couldn't breathe. He was getting extremely sick. His lips were swelling, his face was swelling. And every time he would then meet with the FDNY doctors, and he would say, I don't think it's safe for me to take this second dose that's coming up. The deadline is coming up to do that. I'm really sick. I'm still in and out of the hospital. I can't control this even with prednisone and other steroids and things. And they said, you have to. The only exemption we offer is if you show us a lab test showing an allergy. But you can't get a lab test showing an allergy when you're on all this medication for a histamine reaction. So you can't even take the test because it won't show anything. And it wasn't safe to take him off of all this stuff because he could die because he was having this anaphylactic reaction ongoing. And so they said, tough luck, basically, and he had to get the second shot, which he did because he has a family to support. And he ended up getting massive myocarditis and heart damage, and he'll never work again. He had to retire. He can't even pick up his children or help bring in the groceries. He's severely injured.
So I've met O'Brien before. He's come out and spoken at rallies. It's not easy for him to do. He is not very mobile. It is difficult, but he's done it. He's been on the show before. He just feels that the issue is important. What he was fighting for, let's be clear on what it was he was fighting for. I believe he was fighting for a proper retirement benefit for himself. Do I have that correct?
Well, he filed the first case he filed with Christina Martinez, who's a wonderful civil rights attorney, and the lead attorney on the case that we heard. Well, she and I have split up the case that we're doing now too. The first case he filed was to try to get this enhanced pension benefit or retirement benefit that that you get if you're hurt in the line of duty, hurt on the job as a firefighter. And they agreed that he was hurt because of the COVID vaccine mandate, that is what injured him. But they said that he wouldn't get the benefit because it wasn't an accident. So it has to be workplace accidents. And they said taking a vaccine is not an accident, so you don't get it. So now there's a civil lawsuit and he has a constitutional claim. Way back in 1905, I think a lot of people talk about this case Jacobson, which sort of solidified this the constitutionality of mandating vaccines to some extent. I think people read it way too much into that case, but that's how people read it. But even in Jacobson, the court was very clear that there are some circumstances where a mandate would be unconstitutional. And the one example that they gave was if somebody was not, if there was, reasonable proof that somebody was not fit for a vaccine and could be hurt by it or killed or severely hurt, then that person, it would be cruel and inhuman in the last degree to give it to them, as well as unconstitutional.
So Lou, let's bring up this section in the court's decision where they speak to this. Here is the court case. Let's go. There it is. In this case, Pastrana always had a choice between receiving the vaccine and keeping his job, assuming in Pastrana's favor that the city denied his accommodation request. He was free to decide between taking the vaccine or seeking different employment. So this speaks to why we've titled this, Your Employer Can Mandate Killing You. Sujata, speak to that just a little bit. We only have a few minutes, but please,
this
speak
is
to
something that the courts in the Second Circuit have been doing to try to get out of vaccine mandate cases, both in terms of religion in schools and medical exemptions. And in this case, they're saying as long as your employer or your school or so forth doesn't physically hold you down and forcibly inject you while you're kicking and screaming, then your constitutional rights to refuse medicine, which there is a constitutional right to refuse medicine, are not implicated, because you could always not be able to attend school anywhere in the state or not have a job as a firefighter anymore and have to move to a different state and try to get a job there. It's bogus. I mean, we have something called the unconstitutional conditions doctrine in this country, which we've had since before Jacobson. It's one of the oldest constitutional, principles that a government is not allowed a backdoor to do something. If they're not allowed to hold you down and forcibly vaccinate you against your will, they're not allowed to condition a benefit, even a discretionary benefit, on you waiving your right to opt out of a medication. It's very clear. But this is what's been happening in the Second Circuit. Luckily, that case I mentioned right in the beginning, Mahmoud, also addresses that argument and throws that out as well, because in that case, people had been arguing that parents could just, go to private school or move out of the state or homeschool or whatnot. And the court invoked the unconstitutional conditions doctrine and said that's not at all relevant to this constitutional analysis. That's not true.
Yeah, because basically, a lot of people talk about the Nuremberg Code and how we can refuse this, but it seems like the courts are interpreting, no, no, no. Nuremberg came from the Nazis who locked you in a concentration camp, who stuck their hands on top of you, who forced this into you. That's what the Nuremberg Code protects you from. And clearly that is
Well,
outrageous and ridiculous.
interestingly, I mean, and not to get too far afield, but even there in those cases, Nuremberg was addressing coercion to take vaccines without informed consent. And not everybody was forcibly just injected with things. They were given, they were given incentives to be part of these experimental vaccine trials, even in the camps. And I'm not saying,
No,
it's
no,
a horrific
I understand
situation,
what I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying what the courts are trying to get away. Again, the shell
right.
that they're trying to play. Sujata, we've run out of time here. Thank you so much. It was so informative to go over all of these critical cases. We will have you on soon once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
I mean, after that, my blood starts to boil. I get really like, oh man. But thank God for CHD. Thank God for Sujata Gibson. Thank God for all the warrior attorneys who have given up millions upon millions of dollars to do what's right. There's not enough of them. Children's Health Defense, Sujata Gibson, just so many more. And speaking of someone who's given up so much to do so much for us in our movement, I'm really excited that every Tuesday now, I'm going to be able to introduce a new segment dealing with the crisis in our food and our farms. The phenomenal, the legendary Dr. Meryl Nass. Let's bring it in.
Wow, that was a lovely intro, Michael. I love Michael Kane. I'm thrilled that Michael is back working full time with CHD. And this is the first of my weekly TV shows on the food and farming crisis. And what we're going to discuss today, briefly, I hope we have time to really cover the subject, is something called Section 507, which was a rider slipped into the Environment and Interior Appropriations Bill about 2 weeks ago. It is one sentence. What it says is no federal funds can be used to do anything with a draft risk assessment issued by the EPA in January titled Draft Sewage Sludge Risk Assessment for forever chemicals. Most people know them as forever chemicals, PFOA and PFOS. These chemicals are known to be endocrine disruptors. They have a very strong fluorine bond that cannot be broken down in the environment. So the chemicals which is why the chemicals last forever. And in this draft report, it said for the first time in the United States, although it's been said by the WHO's IARC, their cancer agency, but for the first time in the United States, the EPA draft report said, and I quote, "These chemicals are highly toxic to human beings. The EPA has classified both chemicals as likely to be carcinogenic to humans, and the available human epidemiologic and animal toxicologic evidence indicates that they adversely impact developmental, cardiac, hepatic, liver, and immune systems depending on exposure conditions." Okay, so that's what the report said. And had it been finalized, it would basically require the EPA to regulate these products in sewer sludge. So what is sewer sludge? And I am bringing you an expert environmental scientist, Laura Orlando, who will tell you what happens when you flush the toilet and when when a company that produces toxic chemicals or byproducts puts their chemicals or byproducts down the sewers, down the sink, excuse me, and it mixes with the byproducts of human waste. And what happens to it then? How do communities in the United States deal with the waste products of humans and industries? Laura, please tell us.
Hi, Meryl. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be here talking about sewage sludge. So cities, small and large in the United States, have sewers. And and sewers, particularly in larger cities, all have an industrial component. They have their factories and hospitals and all kinds of users apart from households. And that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind in this story. And so when you flush the toilet or an industry flushes their tanks, that waste material is carried by water through underground pipes into a wastewater treatment plant. For instance, the Boston wastewater treatment plant is called Deer Island, and it services not just Boston, but 42 other communities. So the large urban wastewater treatment plants often handle the sewage from many surrounding communities and businesses. And so when that material is flushed, it's all mixed together. Synthetic chemicals, human excreta, road runoff, chemotherapeutic drugs that are flushed down the systems in hospitals, and those materials enter the wastewater treatment plant, where the first step is just screening, right? And the materials so you're removing grit, you're removing things that might fall down the drain.
So you mean they're put through a screen?
A screen, just like
what is the screen made of?
Metal. It's literally a screen for large items. You see a drain on the road, you drop a tennis ball into it, that screen's going to probably catch that tennis ball. Okay. And that material is put on trucks and sent to a landfill, a municipal landfill. After the screening, there's a large settling tank where the material goes in there, and the larger materials will settle literally in that tank. So you have sand and grit, whatever will settle out of the water goes into the settling tank. That's called primary treatment. This whole system is a 100-plus-year-old system that the upgrades have really been stainless steel chains and things like that. But after the primary settling, there's another tank, which is where what's called secondary treatment happens, where air is injected into those tanks, because the wastewater treatment plants permit, every wastewater treatment plant has a permit under the Clean Water Act. And that permit requires that they reduce, not eliminate, they can't, nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen. And the way they do that is to use bacteria that breaks down the organic matter that's in this aeration basin, which is in this tank. And so they use oxygen to support that aerobic, which means oxygen using bacteria, which breaks down these the organic matter. That settles to the bottom. These microbes slough off to the bottom, along with the synthetic chemicals and anything else that is attracted to solids, right? So now we have a giant chemistry set. The chemicals, millions and millions of pounds of them, chemicals such as PFAS that enter the wastewater treatment plant are not treated by the wastewater treatment plant. That's an important thing to remember. Those that like water will generally move out into the with the treated wastewater, and those that are attracted to solids will settle out with the sewage sludge, which is this unwanted byproduct of wastewater treatment. Then so you've got the screening, you've got the primary settling tank, you've got the secondary settling tank with the air going into it, and then you've got another settling tank where the wastewater is treated with usually chlorine. So is it with a disinfectant to deal with pathogens. And then that liquid, that effluent, that treated wastewater goes out an outfall pipe, which, for instance, on coastal cities is the ocean. Wherever there's a large river, that outfall pipe will go into the river. And that effluent has reduced nitrogen and phosphorus, nutrients like that. It has reduced bacteria because remember, it's been treated with chlorine. But all of those synthetic chemicals that enter the wastewater treatment plant are not reduced. In fact, some of them, depending on the chemistry, can degrade into more dangerous chemicals. And so that those end up either in the effluent or the sewage sludge.
Okay, so now we have sewage sludge, and we're assuming that this is now going to be placed somewhere safe so we're not exposed to it. Since the EPA with the Clean Air and Clean Water Act is supposed to keep our air and water clean of these kinds of substances. So what happens to this sludge? Once it has, so basically at the end of the process, you get a liquid, and that liquid, as you said, either goes out into the ocean or gets dumped back into a river. Now, let me repeat that, and you may want to as well. Everything that came out of your body that has now been liquefied, as well as from corporations that has been liquefied, after it's been through these treatments, it still may have all the same chemicals or worse and pharmaceuticals in it. It then gets dumped back into a river. And in my town, our drinking water comes from the river. Now, so I did not know that this was what happens to my waste, but it's important to note that, and it may be a reason you want to treat your water before you drink it. Now, the solids then get turned into something called sewage sludge. And how does the EPA guarantee that we are going to be protected from this sewer sludge, Laura?
I wish I could tell you that the EPA is protecting us from this sewage sludge, but the agency is not. In fact, the agency is, there's a rule, it's called the Part 503 rule, it's part of the Clean Water Act, that allows what's called the land application of sewage sludge. So this unwanted byproduct of wastewater treatment, full of microplastics, nanoplastics, full of forever chemicals, and a long, long list of thousands, you heard me right, thousands of other chemicals like brominated flame retardants, carbamazepine, which is an anticonvulsive drug. There's a long, long list. That it's codified that material can be put on land as a, quote, fertilizer. The industry uses a public relations term, biosolids, to describe sewage sludge. And there's been a huge effort over the past 30 years to greenwash this material, to make the public think that it's a useful fertilizer, when all along it has been known for decades that it is a reservoir for the toxins that we use in our society.
Okay, so what's in this? So first of all, the sewage sludge had to be renamed, right? Because the people who deal with sewage sludge and make their living off sewage sludge didn't want us to know that that was what was being applied as fertilizer. So it got renamed as biosolids. So you don't know where it comes from. And then it does contain nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So some of it does produce fertilization for crops or other areas. And apparently at the moment, 56% of this sewage sludge is in fact renamed and applied to land. So much of it is sprayed on farmland. And we don't know exactly how much farmland, but according to the New York Times, 20% of US farms have had this uncharacterized dangerous material sprayed on farmland that then is used for either cattle to graze or other animals to graze, or used to grow crops that we eat.
Correct. So,
56%.
and if I gave you a glass of water with arsenic in it, I could argue that hydration is really important to your health, and water is very
Exactly.
important for you to drink. It's a little bit of the sludge story here. Yes,
So-
there are nutrients in it, but there are things that should never be in our food and on our farms and in our gardens.
And so at different times, cattle have died that have grazed on these lands, and people have died in part because there are also some bacteria left in this. Even after all of that treatment, there are bacteria, and in certain cases, they've been very dangerous bacteria and have made communities sick. So this has been going on for over 30 years, and what the EPA does is regulate only 9 heavy metals. So things like arsenic, cadmium, lead are supposed to be measured in this sewer sludge, now renamed biosolids. But only 2 other products, let me see what they are being regulated. Just nitrogen and phosphorus. So,
and that's incidental. They don't really regulate the nitrogen and phosphorus. There are recommended agronomic rates based, application rates of land applying sewage sludge based on the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus it has, which is a terrible trick to play on farmers.
Yes, exactly. So EPA does not regulate pharmaceuticals, pesticides, growth hormones, flame retardants, and other potentially harmful pollutants, which EPA does have to strictly regulate in the air and water. So that doesn't make any sense. I'm reading from this book by David Lewis, who is a career EPA scientist, who points out that science is for sale or has been for sale at the EPA. And in fact, our tax dollars have been used to shut down negative research and negative comments in the media on the use of sewage sludge. So again, our money has been spent to shut people up, to shut down scientific studies, and to make this really disastrous thing possible. Now, what else could you do with our waste material? Well, you could, if it's that dangerous, first of all, you could measure the amount of stuff in it. And for when it has dangerous levels of pollutants, you could bury it in landfills that have been lined with something to retain them in that place, because otherwise, no matter what you do with them, they wind up in the groundwater and we wind up drinking them.
That's right. And, really more than 90% of the sewage sludge in the United States is coming from less than 500 wastewater treatment plants, probably closer to 200 wastewater treatment plants. So the large regional wastewater treatment plants in the biggest cities, New York City generates approximately 30% of all of New York State sewage sludge. And so these are the actors that are creating the most sewage sludge. They happen to be the large urban centers in the United States happen to have the most money, right? They have the biggest budgets for their wastewater treatment plants. They could do the right thing by landfilling sewage sludge, which will always be toxic. It is measured, the toxins in the sewage sludge. There is always forever chemicals in sewage sludge at very high concentrations. And one of the things, the risk assessment that you mentioned earlier told us is that one land application of sewage sludge at EPA regulated agronomic rates. I hate using the word with agronomic in relation to sludge. It shouldn't be part of a discussion of agriculture, but one land application, if that sewage sludge has either 1 part per billion or 1 part per billion of one of 2 forever chemicals, then the farmer eating his or her own eggs off of, from chickens that forage on the sludged land, or eating the meat from their beef that forages on the land, has an elevated risk of a whole host of terrible diseases that you had mentioned earlier, including cancer, just from one land application. Now, let me tell you, parts per million, parts per billion. Everyone, it's easy to get confused by this, but the EPA makes it really clear at over 1 part per billion of PFOA or PFOS, two of the most common forever chemicals in sewage sludge, you can get, the likelihood of getting sick from eating your own food is really high. Now, sewage sludge often has 10, 15, 20 times that much in it, right? We know that. There's many scientific papers that have been published on this. Massachusetts has a public database where you can look and see how many of these chemicals are in the sewage sludge. And what that risk assessment says is if it's 10 times the amount, if it's 10 times 1 part per billion, the farmer has 10 times the risk. That is unacceptable. And it, of course, is not just the farmer eating the food grown on the farm. It's the eaters out there like you and me. So this is an easy problem to solve. Don't spread sewage sludge on land. Reduce the volumes whenever possible and put the sludge in landfills.
Right. And identify where it's been spread before. And if there are
Yes.
dangerous levels, you don't grow food crops. You don't let animals forage there. But over the long term, there's another simple solution, which is you separate the streams that come from industry from the streams that come from households, right? What comes out of us, even though we've got some shampoo and some personal care products in there, is not nearly as dangerous as what comes out of industry. And so industry should not be allowed to put their chemicals down the sewer to be mixed with whatever comes out of us and treated the same.
That's a
That
great point.
material-
That's a
Yeah.
great point.
So that material either has to be treated differently, or the industries should be paying for the whatever it takes to either detoxify or safely get rid of their byproducts, or put them in landfills, safely. So that is really what needs to happen over the long term. Now, in 2 states, Maine, my state, and Connecticut, because of the problems with, farms that have had sewage sludge applied to them in the past, it is no longer legal to apply sewage sludge to land in Maine and in Connecticut. But what I found from the person in my town who is in charge of wastewater is that now Maine sends its sewage sludge relabeled as biosolids to Canada, and Canada, which doesn't regulate it, puts it in bags and sells it back to the United States as fertilizer, and you can buy it in garden stores. So the Sierra Club did a test, and they bought 9 bags of different fertilizers in different garden stores and tested them for these forever chemicals, PFOS and PFOA, and found that 8 of them had toxic levels of the forever chemicals in them. So you don't want to apply. I mean, this is hard for us because all of us have done this. I've done it. You go to the garden store, you buy a quality fertilizer, you're happy, and your plants look good. And now you find out it's probably contaminated with forever chemicals. And it's actually your food is not going to be healthy when you grow it. So very important to be sure there are no biosolids and it may not be labeled. So at one point, a few years ago, I was able to go to the garden store and buy fertilizer that said no biosolids added. This year, when I went and checked all the bags, none of them were labeled regarding biosolids. So you have to be very careful and think about using your own compost or manure from a farm you know what they're doing. In our remaining time, I want to talk about how much money is involved and why it is that the EPA and the biosolids sludge industry has, for over 30 years, continued to basically poison us with this stuff. Now, who's making money? Where is this going? What's happening? And I think Laura can tell us.
Yeah, thank you. There's a relatively small number of companies that are making a large amount of money off the hauling and processing of sewage sludge. So a wastewater treatment plant in a city like New York or Boston, or even a smaller sister city like Portland, Maine will sign a contract with a waste, usually a solid waste hauling operation, and that contract will pay them to haul away the sewage sludge. Once it goes into that truck to be hauled off site, it's no longer the problem of the wastewater treatment plant, right? And those haulers can choose where to bring that sewage sludge. Now, if that hauler, for instance, if that hauler owns a landfill, they're less likely to want to put that sewage sludge in their own landfill, right? They don't get a tipping fee for it. They don't get a fee to put it there because they've already signed a contract to haul it away. So they want to dump it someplace where they don't have to pay to do that. Farms is one way to do that, or processing the sewage sludge so that it's more acceptable to the public. It meets the regulatory, there's a regulatory framework that calls sewage sludge either Class B or Class A. The Class B, they're both toxic. There's no difference. Well, there is some difference in the toxicity. Class A can even be more toxic than Class B. But the real issue is if you add wood chips and compost the sewage sludge, or you heat it up, or you add lime to it, it can be classified as Class A, which means maybe fewer pathogens, maybe different levels of metals, has nothing to do with synthetic chemicals like forever chemicals. And then you can put it anywhere. You can bag it, you can give it away to landscapers, you can sell it to landscapers, you can call it names like Earth Life and Earth Grow. Those are real names of sludge derived products. And you can put it anywhere. As you said, you can bag it in Canada and bring it back to the United States and sell it to unsuspecting gardeners. Companies like Miracle Grow do this. Many companies like Casella Organics do this. There's a long list of them that do this, and it makes it very difficult for the public, as you said, Meryl, to know what they're buying, what they're getting when they go buy a bagged soil amendment or fertilizer. But what it is for the companies, they're making a lot of money both on these hauling contracts, on the processing contracts. There's a company called Synagro that is nationwide. It's a Goldman Sachs company, privately held. And Synagro makes over $26 million a year processing, turning Greater Boston's sewage sludge into pellets and hauling it away. They bring it to several states and Canada. If this stuff was so great, they wouldn't have such a hard time getting rid of it. And but there's a lot of money to be made by a small number of companies to haul and process the sewage sludge.
Yes.
I think it's considered a $3 billion a year industry, something like that.
Yes. And local officials in different towns, there have been several court cases in different states, have been bribed by Synagro and other companies. Synagro is probably the biggest in the United States that deals with this. So the local communities are bribed to give them the contract and look the other way regarding how this stuff is being dealt with. So let's go back to the beginning. So after 32 years of approving this process, which has now led to many farms having to be abandoned because the land has been contaminated with these toxic chemicals, they cannot grow and they cannot graze on this land anymore. And the farmers have had to eat this. There has been no real national method for compensating them for destroyed farmland. And that's why this is the first in our series on how farmers are being attacked, because they've been encouraged to use this stuff as fertilizer and did not know they were putting, highly toxic materials on their land, and in many cases destroying it. So what happened? After 32 years, a week before the Biden administration left office, it issued through the EPA a draft report, a detailed report, finally saying that, oh my God, PFAS, forever chemicals in sewage sludge, are a big problem. They're toxic to people in so many different ways, and they are a probable carcinogen. And so what happened 2 weeks ago is a rider was slipped into the House Appropriations Bill saying this particular report, this draft report, basically needs to be buried. No money can be used. In other words, no further work on it can be done at the EPA to finalize the report because no funds can be spent. No other agencies can use the conclusions of this report. Basically, we're making this go away because we don't want to deal with all of the consequences, the health consequences to humans and animals and fish, and everything else that are finally being revealed in this report. We've managed to bury it in the United States for 32 years. The rest of the world knows about this. They don't do this, but we have, and the EPA wants us to continue doing it. Now, this completely goes against the MAHA ideal. This is anti-humane. This goes against the mission of the EPA, and the current Trump EPA is not our friend. And we have to tell our neighbors what's going on and stop them. Because if we don't bring these kinds of egregious violations of their mission out into the open, we will continue to be poisoned in many different ways. So thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.
I will tell the audience later when this bill comes up for a full House vote and when things are happening, what we need to do. But right now, the important point is to talk to people about what is in the fertilizers you may be buying and what has been spread on farmland in your state. Remember, 56% of this stuff is being spread on land right now.
And what the EPA could do is to change that Part 503 rule that allows for the land application of sewage sludge. Change it, get rid of the whole rule, the language in the rule, and say, the land application of sewage sludge is not permissible. That would be the game changer. That's the right thing to do, and that's what we need the EPA to do moving forward.
Yes, and it doesn't take an act of Congress. This would be a simple rule change that the EPA administrator could do in a matter of weeks. So Lee Zeldin, when you were a member of Congress, you were fighting against PFAS and PFOA, but now that you're the administrator of the EPA, you're encouraging it and exposing us to more of it. So you need to get back to your roots, and you'll be hearing more about this in the future. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you.
CHD. See you next week.
We're live. Okay. What's your name?
I'm Nikki Schumacher. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for being here. What's your name?
Princess Rose.
And how old are you?
3.
3 years old. Okay. Right. So let's start this story from. Should we start it from when your baby was born? Can you turn back the knob?
Yeah, I think so.
This was in what year?
She was born in 2021, and she died in 3 months later, so 2021. So Glory was born very medically fragile. She had heart defects and all kinds of defects. She had an extra chromosome. It's more painful than her death is hearing like people who, I don't care what church you go to, I've heard people from all different denominations who say they're Christians say really cruel things. So that's why I don't like to share the exact diagnosis.
I totally understand.
So, but suffice it to say, we found out that she was going to be medically fragile about 5 days before she was born. It showed up on the
scan.
Yeah.
But before, when you had scans, nothing.
It never showed up. I mean, I'm shortening things a lot. There's so much to it because it was hard to find medical care in the first place because of so many people were laid off due to not getting like a lot of good doctors, I think, were laid off or were scrambling to figure out what their practices were going to do. So she was born medically fragile, and we were life flighted to Utah to a hospital there.
Did you have a cesarean?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, she was our fourth daughter, fourth live birth, cesarean. She really wasn't early by any means, and she was very medically fragile. She had heart defects, and we had to fight really hard from the first moment we found out what her diagnosis was probably going to be. We were told to just go home on hospice. Idaho is where we're originally from, was not going to do anything for her, so they referred us to Utah. That was a big mistake because Utah was just as incompetent, and people can, I guess, like a lot of the things that if I can't get through it today just from emotions or whatever, it's on my Instagram, Nikki Schumacher. But she was born, she was medically fragile, and the first time she coded, does everybody know what a code blue is? Like, that's when, like, they think your baby might be dying, and everybody in the whole floor runs in. So we're wearing our masks because it's the rule. We're trying to follow the rules. And she's kicking and screaming for life. Not really screaming because she's intubated, but she's clawing because they couldn't get the tube placed. And so my husband and I are like snot crying into our masks, so we pull them down because we're snot crying. And before the code is like completely cleared off the floor, like once the code is clear, before we've even taken 2 breaths, the head nurse comes in and scolds us for pulling our mask down to snot cry while our kid is code blue. It doesn't even sound real. Like, it sounds like a movie. So we ended up breaking a lot of rules like that. Not on purpose, but we'd get really angry when they would make comments to us concerning her extra chromosome, like, are you sure you want to do the surgery? You can just pull the plug, that kind of stuff. We had to really get firm with the hospital for her care, and we talked to our lawyer, and he said that even though we were, how do I say, things like that happened made us problem parents, and we ended up being on security escort for most of her life, which was very short.
Because of the mask?
That was one of the long list of things that...
Can I just trying to understand this? So she has a chromosomal thing, and you're saying that they were trying, she was due to have some surgery. Was that a heart thing, maybe?
She had many surgeries she needed to have, but heart surgery was one of them, yeah.
And they were all saying, are you sure you want to do this? Every
single time we talked to a professional, I mean, I flew to Utah to have a C-section to save the child. All my other kids, so this one, my husband caught her because my births are so easy to, like, he caught her before the midwife even arrived, and it was like painless almost. So we literally flew to Utah to save her, and every medical professional, we were like, please, I understand people have different opinions, that's not us. Can you please stop suggesting us not getting surgeries? Can you please stop suggesting that we don't have to do this? And I eventually escalated my language about that, because talking to other parents, these kids don't get equal treatment, and you kind of have to be a little bit angry to...
So if they were suggesting that you didn't have the surgery, what were they suggesting that you did?
They were saying that we could just, like, take her home or just let her die. But when she first got the diagnosis, we said, well, we have a kid at our church that has the same diagnosis, and she's 3 years old. And they said, well, if she has the cognitive dissonance, I'm telling you, I know someone that has this diagnosis. Tons of moms have kids with this diagnosis, and they live to be, if they get the heart surgery and they live through the heart surgery, they have a 50% chance of living to 16. So I'm telling you this, and they're just looking at me and saying, well, she's incompatible with life, so if she has this, just take her home on hospice. That's what Idaho said. So we flew to Utah, and it was kind of more of the same thing. Every single doctor we talked to the first surgeon's credit, he did the surgery, but he said, like, you know, you don't have to do this. And I said, don't say that anymore. And I did. There was a cuss word sprinkled in there, like, stop saying that. And then the mask was an issue, and then
And you always had to wear a mask around your daughter?
if there was other staff in the room, which, so because she was fragile, and she did have one surgery to fix a hole in her stomach, and so often she was sedated. So when she was awake, there was staff in the room, and we couldn't pull her mask down and show her. And then when they were out, it seemed like she was always asleep at that time. So in the whole 3 months, she barely saw what we looked like. And there were other things that aren't really related to, like, the mask mandates or anything. I mean, I have it was like on my TikTok and my Instagram, a video of the doctor when I had never been alone with her. It was like maybe her first or second day of life, and I had asked the doctor to just give me a minute, and he's like, no, I really need to talk to you, da da da. And I'm like, I really need a minute. I just really need a minute. And he can continue to talk, and I have like 30 minutes of him just continuing to talk before I finally say, look, I need a minute with my child. And so she went into that was the last day I ever heard her voice, because she was going to get intubated after that. So I never heard her voice again, and he stole those moments. Like, any joy that we could have had with our times with her, there was always some disrespectful medical person that they don't think it's your kid while they're staying at the hospital, it's their kid. And legally, that's kind of how they see it. So there was a lot of incompetence. The final clincher was we found a doctor who had saved like a lot of babies like Glory, and the hospital that she was at in Utah failed to transfer her and told us that they had started that process and they were lying. So she by the time we figured it out, it was really too late. So only God knows if she could have lived, and I do believe God is sovereign, and we don't weep like those without hope. We know that she's only sleeping, but at the same time we have to share, because other people need to know. Like, the biggest mistake we made was setting foot in the wrong hospital in the first place, because once you're there, you can be put on security duty, and then they won't release your child.
Yeah, talk to me a bit about what happened with that. You said you had security around you?
All the little things we did, like they caught me videoing and taking pictures without permission.
Of your child?
Yeah, but I literally did not know, like, what? Doesn't what? They saw it as a threat, I think, because honestly, I think there was a lot of incompetence that they had caught in themselves, and they were scared of us. So there was the masking issue, the anger issue, I had taken pictures and videos, literally not knowing. They said, well, we're afraid you're trying to catch us doing something. And I'm like, whoa. I wasn't before, but I am now. So yeah, I'm taking pictures of my own child was a big reason why I was put on security.
And what does that look like? Because you weren't allowed to stay with her the whole time, or were you?
I mean, not really. I mean, I did just sleep on the kind of like this pull out, but it's not like we had.
And there was security there the whole time?
No, they just escorted me to and from. It was a big joke because I was in a wheelchair the first 2 weeks of security.
Because you've had a cesarean.
Yeah, so I'm really a threat. I've got a knife wound to the stomach. Yeah, I'm a real threat. The security guys were actually very nice, and probably deep down they thought it was a big joke as well. And the end of the story is that Drew, my husband, was actually fired for not getting the vaccine the same day that Glory died. So that was just poetic, I think. So then the minute she died, we really
Were you with her when she died?
Yeah. Yep. We, of course, once she really was dying, the mask mandates, thankfully, I guess, it's so sick. Like, they have you with Stockholm syndrome. Like, they're being so nice to you because since she's dying, we'll really let you pull your mask down now. But they were telling us she was dying the whole time. So it's kind of confusing. But yeah, I was holding her when she passed away, and we had our favorite nurses and everything. Like, the nurses mostly were lovely people. Most of them have no idea the evil system that they're working for, and a lot of people get that mixed up. When we share our story, they accuse us of like hating medical personnel, and that's not it at all. The system has an algorithm, and our daughter didn't make the cut, and the tune of her bills was, I think, 1.2 million for just laying there and receiving not even a percentage of the treatments that would have been life-saving. So I think having her lay there and not be transferred to another hospital that was willing to try to give her the surgery is really, legally, it's scary because the hospital has tried to follow me on, they probably follow me on social media still. Like, I've caught them following me on social media with fake accounts, and they've admitted to following me on social media with fake accounts. I have to be careful how I word things because they're not above suing bereaved parents postmortem. But yeah, it's a money grab, in my humble
Have you
opinion.
met other parents that have gone through a similar thing as you?
Yeah, with the same diagnosis. Yeah, you have to fight and do this like song and dance around the fires that are coming at you, like the Super Mario game. You know, like you dodge this and then you dodge that, and we had a very short amount of time to get all the information we needed, and by the time we found the doctor that had a lot of experience with Lori's diagnosis, like he'd saved a lot of babies and he was willing to try, which was the main thing, that it was pretty much too late. By the time we found him, and he was like, yeah, send the records over, we're willing. And then the hospital lied to us multiple times, saying that they had started that process and they failed to do that. So, and then when we realized it, we felt so stupid. Like, we had believed them that because we were in contact with this hospital that was willing, like they had a doctor that was willing, a neonatal heart surgeon, and we were in contact with our hospital and wanting to transfer her over and start that process, and they had said and multiple times that they had started the process and they hadn't. So, and by the time we realized that, it was too late, pretty much. So yeah, so then the trauma was compounded because Drew was fired the same day she died, so we had to sell our house. I don't know that we had to, but in our grief, this is what we felt like we had to do. We sold our house. Andrew changed careers. He got a way better job. And we've been traveling ever since. So we love Idaho. It has a lot of good people there, but we didn't feel like we could stay there anymore.
What is your advice to parents who have been told they've got some kind of diagnosis, no matter what it is, and their newborn will be kept in hospital? Do you have any advice for those parents?
Yeah, honestly, if I could do it over again, which is kind of a misnomer because I don't believe in regrets with the sovereign God, but it would be to find the hospital that has a track record with your baby's diagnosis, to find that first before you fly into somewhere. Once your baby is delivered in that hospital, you might not be able to get them out without like an army. So don't go to the wrong hospital first. And so there are hospitals that are known for, and this one is known for that. Like, there are many other moms reached out to me about that hospital. They're really low in neonatal heart conditions. Like, they're bad. But if they're bad at it, why don't they let you take your kid somewhere else? So, and yeah.
The story is so important. It's so tragic, so important.
Yeah.
We hear a lot that children or babies with disabilities of any kind are not treated the same way as those. No,
they're not treated the same, because she died of heart failure and from something that a heart defect that many people have had surgery for and survived. So
thank you for speaking out. Thank you, and tell people again what your Instagram is or how people can follow you.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. Everything's still up on it. Pretty much died when Glory died. I just didn't have but it's all still there. Nikki Schumacher Official.
How are you spelling Schumacher?
Nikki Schumacher, NIKKISCHUMACHER. And then I'm very active on Instagram. You can kind of, you can see a lot more to the story there. There's so much to it. The hospital system is, you guys aren't naive to. I've been watching y'all for years, so it's not like I was naive to it, but till you look it in the face, they're not above anything. So maybe this is too religious for some of the audience, but it's true. I feel like we've given the hospitals over to Molech. But they sacrifice the most vulnerable ones. So
listen, thank you so much. All we're hearing on, what are we on, day 4? And viewers, you must be seeing this too, is hospital murders. That's all we're hearing.
Yeah, I can't legally say that she was murdered because parents have reached out to me and said like that they got sued or whatever, even though their kid really did have wrongful death. Like, you have to be careful what you say on. I would probably speak more strong if I could, but legally.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. And
thank you.
All right. Okay.
The truth is, vaccine injuries are real and they've been ignored.
These childhood vaccinations, the people of America are telling us they are not safe and effective. We are seriously concerned at Children's Health Defense about the disinformation and misinformation out there.
Society does not want to acknowledge vaccine injury, period. My son's life has been ruined physically and emotionally, and he is persecuted for the mere fact that he exists.
After 8 years of litigation, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence that Chris died from her HPV vaccinations.
Parents deserve the truth. We deserve real informed consent, because no parent should have to live the nightmare I do.
I am heartbroken to hear these stories. And it makes me want to do something.
How about we ban pharmaceutical ads on TV?
I've advocated it, and you have a co-sponsor.
The government has decided that this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody.
I am extremely suspicious as a lawyer of immunity that is granted in any blanket way across the board to any manufacturer or to anyone.
So if we're gonna do something, the North Star has gotta be medical freedom. I get to decide what's good for me and my family with proper information. And if I'm given improper information, just like in any other industry, there's gotta be accountability.
No more Pfizer-sponsored science. We need independent science.
I am competing against a pharmaceutical lobby of 1,600 lobbyists. That's 3 lobbyists for each member of Congress. This is insane.
Everybody sitting here, bar two, vaccinated their families with catastrophic results. Over 12,000 signatures on those two buses of death, death, death. When will enough be enough? How many more buses? So this has to stop. And we implore you, please, to follow us at Children's Health Events, at least break down the truth and get to the truth behind the science of what is really happening.